and welcome to the X-22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 196, and today's date is October 23rd, 2013. And the title of this episode is, The FBI Issues More Terrorist Warnings. Be prepared for the next false flag. And yesterday I did a report on is the next false flag event going to be a nuclear explosion? And we're seeing that many things are occurring at this time. We understand that high-ranking military officers that handle the nuclear arsenal have been let go, and many other military officers are being let go. We're seeing that nuclear weapons are being moved without paperwork. And we're getting many different FBI terrorist warnings. And we also saw that the UN nuclear agency's computers were attacked with some type of malware. They don't know if any information is stolen, and they don't know pretty much anything about what happened there. And they're still investigating. So we're seeing all these different signs and indicators that something is going to happen, and now there's even more, and we will get into that later on in the report. But let's get into the current economic collapse news. And what we're seeing is U.S. Airways now, their profits are much lower than expected, and we're seeing this a lot from different companies where the profits are much lower coming in. And what companies are actually doing now, so it doesn't seem like they're raising the prices on products that they put out there. And I had this on the Sentinel alerts. Kimberly-Clark, who manufactures Huggy diapers, what they're doing is they're shrinking their package, and their package now will hold less diapers, but it will cost the same. And I've seen this in tissues. We've seen this in Breyer's ice cream, which used to be a half-gallon. They kept the cover the same size, but it goes in, and I do have this on inflation deflation. If you scroll down, I did a zoom-in shot of the new size of the container, and what we're seeing is inflation, but they're masking it by reducing the quantity and trying to keep the price of the products the same. Now, if all these companies were doing so well, I mean, if you look at the stock market, you know, it's rising very high. It's down a little bit today, but, you know, the S&P is rising, and you would think that companies are doing fantastically because it is at all-time highs right now. But we're seeing many layoffs happening in these major corporations. BASF is going to lay off another 650 people. Cash Call, 769. The University of Phoenix, 500. And Broadcom Corp, 1,150. So we're seeing a lot of companies lay off people, and if the economy is getting better, unemployment is going down, we would see a lot of these major corporations hiring people. But where do we see hiring? We see it in the service industry. We see it with part-time work. We are not seeing it with major companies, and they are not doing this. And actually, if you look at the amount of office space, which I did a report on this a while back, the amount of office space, empty office space, is actually increasing, and this is another sign that these companies that are laying off people are not filling up these spaces. They're leaving them empty at this time. Okay, now I've talked about home prices a lot, but you know, homes and mortgage applications, everything is on the decline, and we've seen home prices increase over the last couple of months, and right now they have missed the expectations. They were expecting a 0.8% increase. These homes only increased 0.3%, because what is happening is that these mortgage applications are plunging. What's following this is the decline of sales, and you know what happens. We saw this back in 2007, 2008, 2009, where mortgage applications were declining. House sales were reaching the peak. They filed right after that, and they started to decline, and then all of a sudden, as housing sales start to decline, people started lowering the prices, and it was just a complete cascading failure of the housing industry. And of course, with the subprime mortgages and that whole scam, the whole thing started to collapse. But what we're seeing right now is the bubble was pumped up this time with investment companies, hedge funds buying houses for cash, trying to make them into rental homes, and they were pumping up the prices. And what we're seeing right now is that these investment companies are getting out. We are seeing many, many mortgage companies laying off thousands of people. Wells Fargo, Citibank, Bank of America, JP Morgan, all their mortgage divisions laying off thousands of people because they understand the housing market cannot be sustained, and it is declining right now. We see from major home builders that the foot traffic to these homes are slowing. We see construction slowing. We're seeing home furnishing and home goods stores, their sales are declining. So this whole thing is starting to fall apart. And guess what? They know this. They understand this. This is why they tried to prop it up during the summer, and they had a whole, propaganda. Obama was out there telling everyone that everything's getting better, housing's doing fantastic, because they really thought they had the Syrian event in the bag, and they thought that by having this event, they would be able to control the collapse at this point and blame it on Syria, Iran, and say this is why the economy is collapsing. Now, since they don't have that event, they have to do something else. And what they're doing right now, and I mentioned this many, many times, is they're using the government shutdown to blame the slowness of the economy. And the Fed even went a step further, saying that they didn't taper because of the shutdown. Well, that's a bunch of BS because they made the decision before the shutdown. And let me just say this again. The shutdown was for 16 days. The Fed was still printing money. All the government people, the president, Congress, everyone there, still earning money, still getting paid. It was only shut down for 16 days. Yes, some statistical information was not received, but this should not collapse and slow down the entire economy at all. Now, another sign that the economy is really not doing well, they are having a terrible time. Their third quarter revenue is a complete miss, and it is really, really bad. And what this says here is this year has proven to be very difficult, with expected sales and revenues nearly $11 billion lower than last year. That is 17% decline from 2012, with about 75% of the drop from resources industries, which is principally mining. We expect resource industries to be down close to 40% for the full year, and power systems and construction industry sales to each be down about 5%. And they went on to say, there is a good deal of uncertainty worldwide as we look ahead to 2014, and our preliminary outlook reflects that uncertainty. And we're not seeing bright spots in mining yet, but the turnaround will happen at some point, and when it does, we'll be ready to respond. The turnaround is just not now and not for the foreseeable future. In fact, as long as the Fed is monetizing, kiss any recovery goodbye. And they understand this. And what else are we seeing? They are definitely preparing for some type of collapse that is coming very soon. We have to understand that there is a bank simulation which simulates a bank collapse which will occur in December. And we do have other events occurring before that time. But right now, billionaires are jumping ship from Wall Street. Warren Buffett, George Soros, among the notable 1%, they're dumping their stocks in an effort to avoid a feared market crash. And this is what we're seeing them do right now. And they are leaving because you have to remember, going back to the Great Depression, in 1929, the stock market hit all-time new highs, and that was like 400 points. And then back in the dot-com in 2007, 2008, and 2008, that crash, it reached a 14,000 all-time new high, and now we're approaching 16, trying to get up to 16,000 points, which is an all-time new high, and we understand why the market is in this gigantic bubble, because the Fed is printing money, buying up the toxic real estate from the banks, and forcing them not to loan it out to people, but to pump it back into the market. And this is why you see the earnings of all these companies coming in so low, because there is no economy. It is an illusion that the Fed has created. And the illusion is, look, the stock market's going up, but all the companies that are reporting, they're all missing revenue, or they're in a sharp decline. Okay, now the corporate media is now picking up that there is a problem with the dollar and there is a collapse ahead. And this was in CNBC, I believe it was, and they reported that while most are now celebrating the end of the government gridlock and the shutdown, the truth is a few understand the consequences of our addictions, which means the U.S. and what their addictions are with this money printing. The real problems of government largesse are money printing, artificial interest rates, asset bubbles, and debt have not been addressed at all. Rather, Washington was merely agreed to perpetually extend its lines of credit and to have the central bank purchase most of that new debt. Instead of placating the fears of our foreign creditors, we have cemented into their minds that the U.S. dollar and bond market cannot be safe for their savings. The eventual and inevitable loss of that confidence will ensure nothing less than surging prices and a complete collapse of our economy. Since there appears to be no political solution in sight, it would benefit investors to take steps now to protect their portfolios from the decrowning of the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency. The writing is on the wall. We can see what is happening. The U.S. right now is by force, by military force, is trying to keep the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency. The elite, the globalists, the central bankers, they know for a fact that the U.S. dollar is collapsing at this point. They understand this. And this is why, and it's funny, not funny in a way that, haha, but funny that they are doing exactly what every single fiat currency does at the end game. They print, they print, they print, or they create money. They push a button now on a computer. But they all do the same thing, and they try to create money out of thin air as fast as they can, and this will eventually increase, because we have to remember that these foreign nations are holding the treasury bonds of the U.S., and when they start to realize the U.S. is collapsing, they are going to want to get rid of it as fast as they can. And again, if they are going to sell their bonds, there has to be someone to purchase them. And guess what? The Fed right now is pretty much the only one in the market purchasing these treasury bonds. So what are they going to have to do? They are going to have to increase QE. And what does that mean? Here we are at the end game. They are going to create even more money, and we understand this. And especially when the housing market starts to completely implode, these banks are going to have more and more foreclosures on their books, and the Fed is going to have to continually purchase more of these toxic real estate loans to keep these banks propped up. And these banks are then going to put the money back into the stock market, and that's going to raise the stock market even more. And this whole thing cannot be sustained, and eventually it will completely collapse, just like every other country has done. Okay, let's move on here. Now, Obamacare, their website, as we know, is a complete and total disaster, and parts of the website are going to be out of order until further notice. I'm figuring that Obama should have taken the deal about delaying Obamacare for another year. Even though Obamacare, and I hear him in his speeches, when he continually says that he made it possible for people to get insurance. And I was thinking, and if you really look at it, what he really has done is he made it mandatory, and you have to buy it, or you're penalized. And the way he made it mandatory where everyone can get insurance is they jacked up the premiums across the board. So even if you have an illness, everyone together is paying a lot more money. And this doesn't make it affordable. It doesn't make it so everyone can get it. Actually, there are many people and a lot of companies that are now not offering insurance because of this, because they're saying you go to the exchange, we're not giving insurance to your spouse. And other people saying, well, I used to be paying $300 a month, now I'm paying $700 a month. I can't afford this. I'm out. I'd rather take the tax penalty than pay for this insurance. So what you're going to see is you're going to see a whole backlash of people not opting into this system, and especially with the laws of Obamacare of them doing home inspections when they want to, which is a complete violation of the Fourth Amendment, and them searching through your homes. A lot of people are going to be opting out. And now I see a federal judge is looking at Obamacare and looking at the tax implications of the law, and they are looking at it right now. And again, if the Congress was for the people, they should have seen this and read this over, because most of Congress, most of the people in government are completely exempt from this, especially the woman who was heading up Obamacare, who was questioned, and they asked her if she went onto the site to test it. She said, no, I don't have to. I have my insurance in another place. Well, guess what? You should be the first one. The president should be the first. If it's so fantastic, they should have been first online, sitting down at that computer, showing everyone how great it is. But guess what? They're exempt because they have better insurance than what he is offering all of us. Now, we understand the NSA is spying on everyone. Now, Merkel is out there saying that the U.S. government is spying on her mobile phone, and we understand that Dianne Feinstein is getting a lot of flack for her NSA spying, and she's trying to make the case that they're only collecting phone numbers and duration of calls, which is a bunch of BS, as we all know. So to stop everyone complaining, she is creating a bill and introducing legislation which would criminally punish those who make critical statements about the NSA and its secret courts. So there goes your First Amendment. You're not allowed to talk bad about her NSA program, which is, again, I don't believe this bill will go anywhere, but even just to think about introducing this because you know you're doing something wrong is unbelievable and completely against the Constitution, which she took an oath to protect and uphold. Now, talking about the Constitution, Interpol Secretary General Ronald K. Noble came out today and he was discussing gun control, and he was discussing the right of citizens to bear arms. And I'm just going to read a portion of this, and I believe he's on the right track, and what he's saying really makes sense. And he goes on to say, ask yourself, if that was never Denver, Colorado, if that was Texas, would those guys have been able to spend hours, days shooting people randomly? Noble said, referring to states with pro-gun traditions. What I'm saying is, it makes police around the world question their views on gun control. It makes citizens question their views on gun control. You have to ask yourself, is an armed citizenry more necessary now than it was in the past with evolving threat of terrorism? This is something that has to be discussed. We have to think about this for a second. The government is letting us know every day pretty much by going to the airport, by the FBI issuing warnings, by them telling us that we're the threat of al-Qaeda, al-Shabaab, lone wolf groups around the U.S., and all of these threats. Wouldn't you want an armed populace to protect the country against these terrorists? Think about that for a second. If they're trying to let us know that we have to be pat down, that we have to completely give up our freedoms, wouldn't it be better to arm all the individuals to protect our country? And he goes on to say, for me, it's a profound question, he continued. People are quick to say gun control, people shouldn't be armed, etc., etc. I think they have to ask themselves, where would you have wanted to be in a city where there was gun control and no citizens armed if you're in a Westgate mall or in a place like Denver or Texas where there are many people armed? And you really have to think about that. Most, I would say the majority, of these mass shootings occur in gun-free zones. Think about it. If they were in the Westgate Mall and there were armed people in that mall, how much easier would it have been to take out these terrorists, these supposedly terrorists that were there? It would have been a lot better. They would have seen many people with weapons, and their whole thought process would have completely changed. Okay, now, Obama is purging military commanders. Now, we understand that he let go two high-ranking officers that handled the nuclear arsenal. And right now we're seeing 9 senior commanding generals have been fired by the Obama administration this year. And he goes on to say that I think they're using the opportunity of the shrinkage of the military to get rid of people that don't agree with them, or they don't agree with Obama and his administration on how he thinks. A Pentagon official who asked to remain nameless because they were not authorized to speak on the matter said, even young officers down through the ranks have been told not to talk about Obama or the politics of the White House. They are purging everyone, and if you want to keep your job, just keep your mouth shut. Because we have to think about this. Why are they purging the military? Well, they are increasing the civilian army, which is DHS, TSA, and FEMA, and they are purging and shrinking the U.S. military, which is not allowed to be on U.S. soil to do anything, and that is why DHS and FEMA and TSA were created. And we can see why this is happening at this point. Now, Fox News came out, and I discussed this yesterday, that DHS is hiring outside help to guard IRS buildings and other government buildings, and Fox News was out there saying that DHS is preparing for the food stamp riots, and I discussed that yesterday also. And what they're saying is that since the recipients of food stamps are receiving less, DHS is spending, $80 million to protect many of the government buildings because they're afraid that all of these people are going to rise up and create some type of riots. And Fox News host Neil Cavuto dramatically reported today that November 1st could be very, very iffy kind of day. This could be all hell breaks loose day. And it kind of looks like they're trying to beef this up and get people out there protesting and rioting. And I believe the government has been trying to do this with the Trayvon Martin case, where they wanted riots and race wars, and it seems like they're continually trying to get the American people all riled up. They tried with the veterans when they were in D.C., with the police pushing them back and forth. It looks like they're trying to get something started so they can go ahead and clamp down and lock down the U.S. with martial law, and it seems like this is the next step, and it seems like this is what they're trying to do at this point, because when the president does declare martial law, all control, and he enacts the executive orders of a national emergency, all control goes to him. Congress is pretty much out of the picture, and he makes all the decisions at this point. Now, out in Europe, Ashton is calling for military-grade drones in the EU. And Catherine Ashton, she is the EU Foreign Affairs Chief, and she wants the EU countries to have military-grade drones for border surveillance. And we understand that the EU and Germany has said this. They want the armed forces to get together quicker than they are and create this type of DHS type of force, and we can see what they're trying to do. They want drones with weapons attached to them, flying over each of the countries and flying over the borders to take out enemy combatants if necessary. So they are preparing and doing the same thing that the U.S. is doing at this time. Now, the FBI is bringing back the Cold War Russian spy recruiting in the U.S., and this goes on to say that the director of Russian government-run exchange program based in the United States is being investigated by the FBI for attempting to recruit Americans as intelligence assets for Russia. And it seems like they're trying to demonize Russia once more like they did during the Cold War. It looks like they're trying to get making it seem like Russia is trying to recruit people to spy and to plant Russian people in the U.S. To spy and get them into different offices like they did during the Cold War. And we'll have to keep an eye on this and see where this actually goes. Now, in Syria, rebels blast a gas pipeline near Damascus, and the power grid just went out. They are in total darkness right now. And this goes on to say a terrorist attack on gas pipeline that feeds a power station in the south has led to power outage in the provinces. And the person said who was viewing this, the whole city just went dark. Reuters cited a resident who lives in the center of the city. A woman who asked to remain anonymous said she saw a major glow of fire, an explosion, and then heavy machine gun fire, and everything just went down. Now the question is, what are they doing in this darkness? What are they doing? Are they stealing some chemical weapons? Are they moving biological weapons? What actually is going on that they needed the darkness to do it? Because we have to remember the central bankers, U.S. government, Israel, and the other countries are continually wanting to remove Assad from government. They do not want him there. They want to put in the puppet government because they need to get Syria and Iran on the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency. Now, the BRIC nations, which is Russia, Brazil, China, India, are moving to create an independent internet cable which will completely bypass the U.S.-centric internet. And the reason they're doing this is because of this NSA spying. So they are laying a cable from Miami, and it's going to go to Brazil, to Africa, to the Asian nations, to Russia, and they are going to use this internet system instead of the U.S. internet system. So they are completely bypassing right now everything that the U.S. does and setting up their own. and other countries will shoot off of this this main cable, which will allow other countries to get the internet, which would also bypass the U.S.-centric internet cable. And we have to understand, the BRIC nations are bypassing the internet, they're bypassing the U.S. dollar, they're pretty much leaving and bypassing the United States. Now, Saudi Arabia is out there threatening to, take drastic actions against the U.S. because the U.S. is not backing up Israel, not going after Assad. The U.S. made a deal with Russia and Syria to dismantle the chemical weapons, and Saudi Arabia's intelligence chief is vowing that the kingdom will make a major shift in relations with the United States to protest perceived American inaction over Syria, because Saudi Arabia knows that the U.S. dollar is in a decline and ready to collapse. And what they're saying is we might be moving and selling all of our oil using China's money instead of the U.S. dollar. And if the Saudis do break the petrodollar monopoly, it would severely damage the U.S. economy, because Saudi Arabia realizes that they needed to get into Syria and Iran to keep this propped up for a little while longer. Without that, the petrodollar is collapsing and imploding faster and faster. And they understand this. And this goes on to say, in a nutshell, any country that wants to purchase oil from an oil-producing country has to do so right now using the U.S. dollar. And this is the way it works. For example, the UK cannot simply just go and buy oil from Saudi Arabia by exchanging British pounds. Instead, the UK must exchange its pounds for U.S. dollars and then use those U.S. dollars to pay for the oil. So each country needs to keep a hoard of U.S. dollars on hand, but they don't keep this. They don't have like stacks and stacks of U.S. dollars. What they do is they take those U.S. dollars and they buy treasury bonds with it. And this is how these nations have treasury bonds. And what we're seeing right now is that if these countries do not need the U.S. dollar anymore, what they will end up doing is getting rid of their treasury bonds, getting rid of any U.S. dollar that they have, and sending it back where? Back to the U.S. When that money comes back to the U.S., what will happen? We will see inflation, because all of this money coming back from all these nations who don't need it anymore will not keep the prices down. We will see an influx of a huge amount of cash in the U.S. floating around, and this will just completely push inflation into overdrive, and we will then see inflation at this point. And we have to understand that China is now the #1 importer of oil in the world. And at this point, they are actually importing more oil from Saudi Arabia than the United States. So the question is, if you were Saudi Arabia, where would you rather be at this time when you're looking at the big picture? And if they go, many of the other Middle East countries will go also. Now, let's move on here. Now, there is a warning from the State Department that it has learned of a plot to abduct Western journalists covering Syria civil war, and is warning those who travel there to take precautions. And what they're saying is any American citizen really should leave Syria right now as fast as they possibly can. And if they decide to stay there, they should maintain a high level of vigilance. And it looks like they're preparing to do something in Syria, so they want these reporters out there so they can't report on what is actually going on, and they want other American citizens out there because something is coming down. They do not just give these warnings, just like they gave a warning in August, locking down the Middle East about some type of terrorist attack, and guess what happened? They had a chemical attack. So we know that something is about to happen. And what else is happening here is that al-Qaeda is trying to get their hands on Gaddafi's leftover uranium and his missiles. He has about 4,000 surface-to-air missiles, each capable of downing a passenger jet, and thousands of barrels of uranium and yellow cake. Gee, where do we hear yellow cake before? That's right, weapons of mass destruction, and they had yellow cake in Iraq, and they're using the same exact thing again, trying to build up the propaganda for a false flag event. And this inventory collected by the International Atomic Energy Agency accounted for 6,400 yellow cake barrels. So we can see that uranium, yellow cake, air surface-to-air missiles, they are trying to make the case and using the propaganda that they are building up, and some of this might make it back to the U.S. to have some type of maybe dirty nuke go off here in the U.S. Now, top Iranian generals are warning America of terrorism. And I'm just thinking back to Lindsey Graham right now, who says, Iran might send over a nuke under a boat into Charleston Harbor because two top generals of the Islamic Republic have warned the United States of a coming terrorism act. America, on the one hand, this is what Brigadier General Masoud Jazahari has said, that America, on the one hand, arms al-Qaeda, and the other hand, it kills al-Qaeda members. Such a double standard policy will be divulged sooner or later, and the weapons in possession of al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups will be the target of Americans. And we can see what is happening here. They are building the propaganda with the Uganda terrorist attack, Kenya terrorist attack, with the al-Qaeda leader coming out saying that they're going to attack the U.S. in many different locations with their lone wolf groups. And right now, FEMA is having a preparedness drill at a nuke plant during this week. And what is happening at the same time is Congress is going to close down on October 24th, which is tomorrow, and everyone is leaving town to go to Florida. So they're having a FEMA drill in Maryland's preparedness to respond to an emergency at a nuke plant, and Congress, the government, is shutting down and leaving for Florida. This could be a potential false flag coming up, and we can see definitely something happen. Maryland is very close to the area, and they might have been, this might have been planned on this date purposely, and this could be a very huge deal. We're going to have to see what happens. It's just it could just be a huge coincidence that this happened to happen at this time. But then again, I do not believe in coincidences. These things are always planned. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.